Hello, first graders. This is Miss Thompson with your social studies today. And today we are going to be studying resources. So, for the last few days, we've been talking about economic and financial literacy, which has to do with money, making money, different jobs, which is also called occupations, how we should save money, different ways we spend money based on wants and needs. Um, and then yesterday we learned about goods and services. So today we are going to start talking about resources. And resources we're going to learn are things that make the good or service happen or helps make those things. So if you look here, we have a chef. Chef's someone that makes food or cooks food. This is actually a wheat plant, and wheat is used a lot of times for bread. And you know, of course, this is a stove. So all of these have in common that they are resources. They help to make what's called a product. So we're going to talk about that today. Our learning targets are: you will understand what resources are. You will know the difference in capital, human, and natural resources. Those are your three kinds of resources. You will understand what resources are used for. Key vocabulary is resource, human resource, natural resource, capital resource, and product. Resource. Resources can be broken down into three types. So all of these are considered resources. There's three types. There is human resources, natural resources, and capital resources. A resource is used to create a product. So one of these kinds of resources will always be used to create a product. And if you go back to that very first slide we were on, all of these are considered resources because they help make a product. And you're going to see in a minute that in this case, these resources were making the product called bread. Remember, we talked about wheat is the product or the resource that makes the bread. Of course, you need a stove, and you're going to need a chef or a cook. Okay, so let's go back. So that's what a resource is. So let's use a loaf of bread as an example. We just talked about that. There's your loaf of bread. That is your product. The loaf of bread is the product being made. It takes different types of resources to make the loaf of bread, which is again called the product. There's lots of different things that can be the product, but this is the example we're going to use. Now let's see what resources are needed to make the product, which remember is our loaf of bread. The first type of resource needed is our human resource. It takes a baker to make the bread. And here is our baker that makes the bread. You can see him making the bread. This is called a human resource. This is easy to remember because this is a human, so it's a human resource. The next thing it takes to make bread is called a natural resource. A natural resource is something that comes from nature. And I have that word bolded, nature, because doesn't it look like natural? So it's something that comes from nature and it is used to make a product. In the loaf of bread example, the natural resource is wheat. It takes wheat to make the bread, and the wheat comes from nature. It is grown in the ground. So usually our natural resources are going to be things that's grown in gardens, in fields, things that are planted that we use to make a product. And lastly, the loaf of bread example, a capital resource is also used. In this case, the capital resource is a stove. A capital resource is a tool or machine that's used to make a product. It takes the stove to bake the bread. So let's review. We had the human resource, which was the what? Right, the baker, the man that made the bread, the human. What was the second resource called? The natural resource, and that's what comes from the ground, what we make, that we use to make the bread, and that was wheat. And then the third kind is a little hard to remember. It's called a capital resource, and it's going to be a machine or a tool or something that we have to use to make the bread. And the bread needs a stove. It's not enough to have the human, and it's not enough to have the wheat. We also need a machine or a capital resource to bake the bread. In this case, the capital resource is a stove. Okay, so here is your assignment. You're going to cut out the human, natural, and capital resources on the next slide. So you're going to have to print those for me. You're going to glue them in the correct order on the following slide. These pages can be printed to cut and paste. When complete, you're going to take a picture and email it to your teacher like always. So let's look at this in detail to make sure you understand what you're going to do. So you're going to cut out all of these different resources here. Trying to make it where you can see this. Okay. Over here on this side, it says cut out these human, natural, and capital resources. You're going to glue them in the correct order on the product page. So you're going to see what that is in a minute, but let's just talk about these for just a second. A seamstress is somebody that sews. This is a human. So what kind of a resource do you think this is going to be when we need to cut and paste on the next page? She is a human. So yes, that is correct. She is going to be a human resource. Once again, we have a human. This word says author. Author is somebody that writes books. But once again, we see a human. So this is also going to be a human resource. And the last one also is a human. And it says he's either a florist or a farmer, but it doesn't matter because either way, he's going to be a human resource because he's a human. Okay, here we have our flowers. What kind of resource is that going to be? Think about where flowers grow. Right, they grow in the ground, so they are part of nature. So they are going to be a natural resource. Same thing for the tree here and the cotton plant. All of these things on this line are natural resources because they come from the ground, they grow from the ground, they're part of nature. So if these are our human resources, these are our natural resources, then what are these things going to be called? Was that last resource we talked about that was either a machine or a tool? Right, it's called a capital resource. So here you have a computer, and here you have a sewing machine, and then you're going to have a pair of scissors. Now, a scissor is also considered a tool or machine. It's a tool. I know these two are machines, but a capital resource can also be a tool. So in this case, a scissor is a capital resource because it's a tool. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. Once you have those cut out, If you look at these columns here, this is your natural resource column. So you're going to use these for this column right here, okay? So a flower bouquet, you're going to have to think which one of those natural resources is going to make a flower bouquet. So let's go back and look. Out of these three natural resources, which one of these three is going to make the flower bouquet? Is it going to be flowers, the tree, or the cotton plant? Very good. It's going to be the flowers. Put a lot of flowers into a flower bouquet. Okay, so that's the natural resource for a flower bouquet. What about the capital resource for the flower bouquet? Let's go back and look at our choices. Down here they are on the bottom. A computer. Is a computer going to make the flower bouquet for us? No, don't think so. What about a sewing machine? Sewing machine usually sews clothes and fixes things and like fixes clothes and puts zippers on and stuff like that. Is it going to make a flower bouquet? No. What about scissors? It must be scissors. That's what we've got left. But if you think about it, it makes sense because you're going to have to cut these flowers with something in order to put it in the flower bouquet. So a scissor is going to be our capital resource here. So we have our natural resource, which was the flowers. The capital resource for the flower bouquet is the scissors. Lastly, we're going to look for our human resource. So let's go back one more time. And which one of these humans are going to be the one that makes or helps to make the flower bouquet? Is it going to be the seamstress who sews clothes? Nope, that person's not going to make a flower bouquet. Is it going to be the author, the man that writes the book? No. What about the florist or the farmer? A florist person is somebody that works with flowers and makes bouquets. So, right, this is the one we're going to choose. So I've completely done the flower bouquet for you. So you're going to paste those here. So now you're going to work on doing the last two by yourself. Okay? Okay, so if you have any questions, you can email me. And when you get finished, you can make a picture of this sheet right here and email it to your teacher. I hope everybody has a terrific day. Bye.